Hi everybody, welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe. You guys, sometimes I can't believe the way that things play out on my channel. I feel like the Lord has a hand in it so that I can learn, so that you guys can learn if you haven't heard this stuff before. Okay, so the last video that I recorded, we were looking at this book called Melvin J. Ballard, Crusader for Righteousness. And I came across this book because in the recent General Conference, Elder Rasband gave a talk and he referenced this book in the footnotes. This is where we find a really interesting prophecy about South America from Elder Melvin J. Ballard, who was a member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. And whenever I come across books like this, I like to look through them and see if there's any other interesting things, any visions or visitations or anything about the second coming and stuff like that. And it turns out there's something in here that I needed for my spreadsheet where I'm trying to compile this timeline of events for Missouri and the return to Missouri. And over the last couple weeks, well, maybe like month or two, really, there's this story that I never knew about the dedication of the Salt Lake Temple in 1893 and the events that took place afterwards in Missouri. And this is just another thing. So I feel like it was kind of meant to be. I didn't even know that this book existed until earlier today. Okay, so let me just read what I found and then we'll do a little analysis. And then we'll do an overview of everything that I have for my Missouri timeline. It's so fascinating. Okay, so chapter 3, First Mission. In 1896, the church conducted an experiment in missionary work. Already, this is interesting. Brigham H. Roberts, otherwise known as B.H. Roberts, this is him right here. He was in the First Council of the 70. Brigham H. Roberts, who had distinguished himself as an expounder and defender of the faith, was called to preach the gospel in some of the leading cities of the United States. Accompanying him on this mission were George D. Piper, who had a fine tenor voice, Melvin J. Ballard, who had a beautiful baritone voice, and Edward P. Midgley, organist. These brethren were to rent suitable halls and present the gospel in a way that would appeal to discriminating people. Okay, so you get it. Not only are they going to preach the gospel, but they're going to include music, which makes a lot of sense because we've talked about this a number of times on the channel that the Tabernacle Choir of today actually does a lot of missionary work. There are people that join the church after they come across the Tabernacle Choir, including one of my investigators on my mission when I was in Valencia, Spain. It was a Nigerian family, and the dad was kind of hesitant, but I gave him one of my CDs of the Tabernacle Choir, and he had this spiritual experience. He had a dream about the choir, and then that's what got him to decide to join the church and get baptized. So I don't know if this was like the beginnings of that process. You'll remember if you've been watching my channel for a couple weeks now, right after the Salt Lake Temple was dedicated, the first presidency and the Tabernacle Choir went to the Chicago World Fair and they made a stop in Independence, Missouri. They made a couple other stops too, and they performed. So I don't know if this is like when this whole Tabernacle Choir missionary thing started, but it's interesting. But okay, let's continue. This isn't even the point of the video. Okay, an experimental mission. These brethren were rent. Okay, I already read that. In this way, it was hoped to obtain favorable newspaper publicity and to open up new fields for missionary work. Of this introduction to his missionary career, Elder Ballard wrote, quote, "In the fall of 1895, I received a letter from the missionary committee of the apostles asking if it would be possible for me to take a mission to the southern states early in 1896. At this time, I was attending the Brigham Young College at Logan in the dual role of teacher and student, having graduated from the institution 2 years previous. In answer to this inquiry, I stated what I was doing and left the matter with my brethren, explaining that I would do whatever they said. That's faith right there. I received a reply stating that I was to continue my activities at the college until the close of the school year, which was June 5th, 1896. Shortly after, I received my appointment to the Southern States Mission, but soon received another letter stating that my mission was changed to the Eastern States. Then my mission was changed again. This time, I was to labor with Elders B.H. Roberts and George D. Piper, who were to visit various cities of the United States in the interest of the gospel to allay prejudice and to open up new fields of work. Accordingly, I prepared for this work, leaving my home June 30th, 1896. On my arrival in Salt Lake City, I went up to see the brethren and talked over the mission. On July 6th, we met with the First Presidency, and they gave us some instructions which were contained in a letter I have preserved. President Woodruff gave us some good advice, shook hands with us, and left us. I was set apart for my mission under the hands of Lorenzo Snow, John Henry Smith, Heber J. Grant, Seymour B. Young, and B.H. Roberts. John Henry Smith was mouth in setting me apart. He also ordained me a 70. All the arrangements had been completed at 7 p.m. Of course, what other time would it be? Of course it's 7 p.m. I left for my mission, leaving my bride of 3 weeks in Salt Lake City. Oh my gosh, you guys, he left school and he left his newlywed wife of just 3 weeks. This is faith. And I think that we need to ask ourselves, do we have this kind of faith? Because there's so many times that we complain when something is asked of us. You know, just even simple things that are just minor irritations. Anyway, that's something to think about. Okay, so look at this. Here we go. Met in Kansas City by President Spencer of the Northern States Mission. The small group threw themselves immediately into their appointed work. The diary continues. At that time, there was not a member of the church living in Kansas City. The nearest family was 6 miles out. And we're going to get to that in just a minute. I think that might be the Preeter family that I did a video about. I can't remember his first name. I think it was Richard Preeter. He was the first branch president of the Independence Stake. This might be who this is referring to. Okay, on July 12th, we held our first meeting in the music hall in that city. There were 150 people present. The hall had a seating capacity of 1,200. We commenced by singing, "Oh My Father." After the opening service, Brother Robert spoke for 1 hour on the relation of Mormonism to the Christian world. The people were much interested, and in the evening, we had about the same number present. The subject of the evening meeting was the mission of the prophet Joseph Smith. On July 15th, we held a meeting in Independence, Missouri. Okay, it was already interesting them going to Kansas City, but they came here to Independence, Missouri on an experimental musical mission. And this is right now, at the time that we're reading this, he's a 70, but he later becomes an apostle. So this is just another general authority. I'm gonna have to make a separate column on my spreadsheet to highlight when a general authority goes to Missouri, but this is one of those times, but this time as a 70. There were 200 present, mostly Josephites. They were very attentive. I shall never forget the feeling I had when entering that city, realizing that our people were but a short time before driven out by a mob. The next day, we returned to Independence to hold another meeting. This one was well attended. Brother Roberts bore a strong testimony to them, which made some of them cringe. Yeah, I guess that'd probably be a little uncomfortable, especially if you're from one of these splinter groups. Others were greatly affected, and some became bitter. And that's the end of that quote from the entry. Campaigning in Kansas City that day was William Jennings Bryan, Democratic nominee for president. Elder Ballard was much impressed by his oratory. Local disinterest in their message soon ended the trio's Kansas City labors. On July 21st, 1896, just want to point out that's the seventh month, and 21 is 3 sevens. Melvin was in Independence again, this time savoring the beautiful and peaceful surroundings of a Zion that might have been and would surely be one day. On July 21st, so this is another entry, on July 21st, Brother Piper and myself went again to Independence, Jackson County. We visited the Temple lot, and that's another thing. I want to highlight the times that something has taken place at the Temple lot. It turns out that there's more that's happened there than what you may have realized, or at least for me. I didn't know that so many had been to the Temple lot. We visited the Temple lot. It is a most beautiful spot, made so by nature. Everything was quiet and serene. It crowns a hill. I am told it is about the highest point between Allegheny and the Rocky Mountains. Now, I wanted to see if that was true, so I just did a search on X with Grok, X's AI chatbot. And it says the Temple lot in Independence, Missouri is noted as one of the highest points in the area, overlooking Kansas City about 9 miles to the west. However, its elevation is not explicitly quantified in available sources, so a precise comparison to other high points between Allegheny, let me know if I'm pronouncing that right, I'm not sure, the Allegheny and Rocky Mountains, such as Panorama Point, Nebraska, or Black Mesa, Oklahoma, is challenging. Independence, Missouri lies in the Great Plains, where elevations are generally lower than mountain ranges, but can still be locally significant. The Temple lot's prominence is described in historical and religious texts or religious contexts, emphasizing its elevated position relative to the surrounding area, including Kansas City. Given that Panorama Point is the highest point in Nebraska and exceeds other known elevations in the region, it likely surpasses the Temple lot in absolute elevation. But still, it is interesting that it's at a high point in the Kansas City area. So I don't think that that's by chance. Okay, continuing. We took 2 photographs of this spot, sat under the shade of beautiful trees, and sang several songs about the promises made to this historic place. Strange indeed were our thoughts as we sat here and realized that at some future time, this favored spot would be the crowning place of the whole earth, and that Christ himself would dwell among men. After visiting the Temple lot, we went to the Big Blue River, which, by the way, you guys, ever since moving here to Independence, everything around here, all the names include the word blue. There's Blue Ridge Parkway, Little Blue this and Blue that. It's all over the place. I don't mind because blue's my favorite color, but if you ever come to Independence, everything is blue, blue, blue. Okay, after visiting the Temple lot, we went to the Big Blue River, another important place in the history of our people, which I guess I don't know what that history is. If anybody knows and can clue me in, please put it in the comments. We secured the use of a boat for an hour and went down the river to where it joins the Missouri. We took several photographs of this historic river. Okay, so that's what I have. This is another piece to the puzzle. So here's my spreadsheet, timeline Missouri. Let's just run through it really quick. This is what I have so far. I know that I don't have everything, but the first thing that I have on here is 6 missionaries that went to Independence, Missouri in 1830. And that's what started the gathering of the saints to Jackson County. That's the first year of the church, the year that the church was established. I didn't know that it started happening that soon. The next year, Joseph Smith went to Independence, Missouri, and that's where he received the revelation from the Lord that it's going to be the New Jerusalem, And during that same trip, they dedicated the land for the city as well as the temple lot. And Joseph Smith laid a stone. And I believe that stone is in the White Chapel of the Church of Christ. They have like a little visitor center, like foyer type thing. And they say that they have the stone there. So, and then Joseph Smith went there again the next year. He had already been set apart as the president of the high priesthood, but he came to Independence, Missouri to be sustained by the saints in Zion. And then the next year after that, that's when the saints were expelled from Jackson County in 1833. Okay, and then, that wasn't the end of the saints in Missouri. We still had Far West and other locations. But, and I'm going to get all that on here at some point. But in 1838, that's when Missouri Governor Boggs signed the extermination order, and that's what made us leave Missouri. And then all this time goes by. I'm not sure if anything really significant has happened during this time right here. I'll have to check. I guess there is Richmond, Virginia, which is east of Independence, and you had Oliver Cowdery, David Whitmer, and other saints that lived there for a while. But anyway, 1893, the Salt Lake Temple is dedicated in April. And then in the fall, that's when the First Presidency and the Tabernacle Choir, as well as Orson F. Whitney, they went to the Chicago World Fair. And on the way, they stopped in Independence, and the Tabernacle Choir sung there. They were greeted by the mayor and the people of the city. They were very welcoming. And they visited the temple lot. Then the next year, there's a letter that you can read on the Wilford Woodruff's the Wilford Woodruff Papers website, a letter from Jerome E. Page, which somebody commented on that video where I said I didn't know who that is. I couldn't find it anywhere. According to Chloe Annan, they say Jerome E. Page is the son of early church member and leader John Page. And in that letter to Wilford Woodruff, he was saying the people here would be interested in the church coming back, in colonizing this area. Every businessman in the county wants you back. Okay. And then 2 years later, or 3 years after the dedication of the Salt Lake Temple, that's when you have this experimental mission that we just read about, with Elder Melvin J. Ballard and B.H. Roberts, with Elder Melvin J. Ballard later becoming an apostle. So I do think that it's significant. I think that when President Wilford Woodruff went to Independence, I don't think that he would do anything just based on his own judgment. I'm sure the Lord inspired him to do these things, but I think that something happened when he went there, and that led to this mission, which, only part of the mission was spent in Independence, but they did go to Independence. And then the year after that, in 1897, that's when the first branch was organized in Independence since the expulsion in 1833. I was right. His name is Richard Preeter. He was the first branch president. It was his family, and I think 2 other families. I need to get that nailed down. So all this activity right here is really interesting, and it's really interesting to think of the relationship between the dedication of the Salt Lake Temple and the return to Missouri. I think that it is connected. After that, 70 years after the expulsion from Jackson County, the First Presidency authorized the purchase of the temple land that the Independence Visitor Center and the Independence Stake Center sit on today, which is significant. It's part of the 24 temple complex. 70 years later. And then the next year, that's when the land was actually purchased, 25 acres. Okay, then we're going to skip forward. We have President David O. McKay that visited Independence, Liberty Jail, and Adirondack in 1966. And I know he went to Far West too. I'm going to have to update my sources because I have quotes about him going to far west. 1971, with that land that was purchased all the way back in the early 1900s, the Independence Visitor Center was dedicated, and it was built by President David O. McKay, and he consulted with President Alvin R. Dyer, who consulted with the original plans for the city of Zion, which would have 24 temples, and they built the visitor center to be the same width and length as was revealed to Joseph Smith for the temples, so that it could, in the future, be renovated and turned into a temple. Okay, and then in 1976, which was 137 years, 7 months, and 30 days after the extermination order was signed in 1893 or 1839, the Missouri governor of 1976 officially rescinded that order that had been on the books for all that time. And of all years, it was the bicentennial year of the United States. And he mentioned that in like the, whatever it is, the thing that he signed to rescind the executive order. He talked about the fact that that was wrong, and that everyone in the United States is ensured by the Constitution that they can practice their religion and have freedom of religion. So anyway, it was really special that it happened in that year. 1978, President Spencer W. Kimball visited Independence, and then the next day, so that was September 1st, the next day, Adamondiaman in Far West. June 1st, 1997, the St. Louis, Missouri Temple was dedicated by President Gordon B. Hinckley, and it was the 50th temple of the church, which I feel like that's special because in the Bible, 50 is a special number a couple times. One, because every 50 years was a Jubilee year. So there could be some symbolism to that, the way that things worked out. Also, with first fruits, which leads up to Pentecost 50 days later, you have 50 days. So you have the first fruits that are offered at the temple and sacrificed. And then 50 days later, that's when you have Shavuot, or the Feast of Weeks, or Pentecost. So you have this thing where you have either 49 years or 49 days, and then the 50th year or the 50th day is the special day. So St. Louis, Missouri Temple, 50th temple. And then in 2012, the governors of Missouri and Kansas released a proclamation acknowledging the contributions of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So you can definitely see how attitudes have changed over the years. And they toured the newly built Kansas City, Missouri Temple. And then that temple went into operation and was dedicated by President Thomas S. Monson. And it was the 137th temple of the church. And we just mentioned that number, 137, back here. 137 years after the extermination order is when it was rescinded during the bicentennial of the United States. And I did a video talking about how 137 is a special number in physics. Just do a Google search for, just 137 or fine structure constant. It's essentially a number that they found in nature where if it was any different value, life would not be able to exist as we know it in this universe. So anyway, I always like to point that out. I'm excited to see what else is going to end up on this timeline. It never ceases to amaze me, the things that come to light and how they come to light. I probably never would have found this book if it wasn't for Elder Razban, and I'm sure the Lord guiding me to make that video, which caused me to stumble across this. What else are we going to find? It's mind-blowing. Okay, that's going to be it for this one. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.